Hello, this is Mike Swanson of WallStreetWindow.com. I'm speaking with Jordan Roy-Byrne, who runs the website TheDailyGold.com. How you doing today, Jordan?
Hey, Mike, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're doing this interview towards the end of the year, and I probably won't get a chance to talk with you before New Year's. We're almost there. And this has been a wild year for gold. There's no doubt about it. And, we had a tremendous run-up in the gold stocks through the summer, then a tremendous drop. It's dropped more than I thought it would. But I got to tell you, during that run-up, it was fun. It was exciting. I actually bought a book during, I think it was April, the Jim Rickards book, The New Case for Gold. He made a prediction for $10,000 an ounce of gold. And that was fun to read and think about. And I had a big gold position at that time. And that was exciting and to hear the prediction. But now, gold's fallen. It's fallen more since the Fed meeting. Gold fell below $1,200 an ounce. And now I get predictions that it can fall to $200 an ounce, $400 an ounce. I saw, Harvey Dent is coming out and saying that the drop in gold may be an indication that we're heading for a complete and total economic collapse next year, that we're not going to even be able to get food from the grocery store. You better go buy your beans and store them up so you have something to eat in your belly. So what the world's going on? What do you think?
Well, it's a lot of things to touch on there, Mike. But in respect to that last point, I would say, having your own emergency food supply. There's nothing wrong with that. So I wouldn't make fun of people who do that. That seems very wise. It's a good insurance if some of these prognosticators happen to be right, which, as we know, rarely is the case. And with respect to the new case for gold, there is no new case for gold. Gold doesn't need a new case. It's always been driven by real interest rates and falling real interest rates or negative real interest rates. And I mean, Mike, that explains what has happened. I mean, real interest rates, they made a peak somewhere middle towards the end of 2015, and then they declined until the summer, and that's when bond yields bottomed, and bond yields have shot up so quickly that even inflation-adjusted interest rates, that's real interest rates, even they have increased quite a bit. Even looking at the real 5-year TIPS yield, back in the summer when the precious metals peaked, the real 5-year TIPS yield was actually at a 2-year low. So that was very bullish for precious metals, but then it completely turned around, and in the update I did this weekend, I mentioned that that indicator, the real 5-year TIPS yield, hit a 11-month high. So, I mean, that basically explains what's going on with gold, or I should say what has gone on this year, where the fundamentals have just been all over the place. They were bullish, and then they changed because of what was happening in the interest rate market and because of the election of Trump, and the market is pricing in much higher interest rates. I mean, my general view here, Mike, I think the last time we talked, I looked at the date, and I think around that time I was saying gold was going to come back down and retest its low. I thought we were going to get a better bounce last week, but we did not. We continued to break lower. So that concerns me. At some point here, maybe it's in January, we're going to probably see a 2-month rally, maybe a month and a half, or in a 2.5-month rally. We could get a good rebound rally just because precious metals are extremely oversold. Everyone hates them now. But the one concern, Mike, is the price action is still really poor in the metals and in the miners. GDX has kind of been flat the last 2-3 days. GDXJ and the juniors have just continued to sell off. Looking at gold, it had a weak rally for a couple days. It kind of looks to be in a bearish consolidation here. So what concerns me is that perhaps gold, before we see that bigger rebound, perhaps gold could, and it closed at 1133 today, perhaps it could drop to, excuse me, sorry about that, perhaps it could drop to 1085 or even 1050 before we get that 2-month rally. Bigger picture, Mike, I don't see, even though I'm looking for this, 2-month rally, and that could start in the next, it could start in the next week, could start in the next 3 weeks. I'm not sure. At that point, if we do get that rally, I should say, then I'm looking for after that a final decline to a final bear market low. I mean, looking at listeners, if they follow my work, they know I do lots of analogs. Gold is now in its longest bear market ever in terms of time. Now, certainly, it could go on, another couple months or even another 6 months. Nobody knows for sure. But I'm just looking at the really strong support gold has around 1,000, specifically 975. We also know 1050 is a support level, 1,000 is a support level. So, nobody knows where it's going to bottom. But when I see gold at some point next year, and hopefully it's earlier next year rather than later, when I see it falling below 1,000, below 1080 to 1050, that's going to be the point in time when I'm going to get ready to buy what I think are the best juniors. I'm actually, in the last couple of days, I've been doing a lot of research and looking at my list and trying to pare it down. And of course, Mike, with respect to the individual stocks, I mean, it depends what their price is going to be in the next quarter or two, perhaps when they could bottom. I mean, you could love something, but if it's expensive, you're probably going to buy something that's really cheap. And just the last point, Mike, I think the dollar in the stock market are really key here. The stock market, as we know, the valuations are out of control. The stock market's performance over the next 5 years, 10 years is going to be poor by historical standards, but that doesn't tell us what's going to happen in the next year or even the next 6 or 9 months. But I see the stock market moving higher to start the year. Maybe it'll last 2-3 months. Maybe it'll even last longer than that. But I see the stock market making a peak and falling into a bear market sometime next year. And gold really needs that to start its new bull market. The other thing gold needs, which I think will help it start its new bull market, is the dollar getting way too strong. If you look at the dollar index, it's had a major breakout above 100. It's really bullish. It has upside targets at about 107, but also the bullish flag breakout projects to as high as 120. I also have some dollar analogs that I've looked at, and those kind of show that the bull market could last another year or so, maybe a little bit longer. But keep in mind, gold tends to bottom. It can bottom months before the dollar peaks. But the real last point here, Mike, I know I'm getting long in the tooth here, but what I'm looking for, and I think gold really needs a really strong dollar. I know that sounds perverse, but when we get a really strong dollar, that's going to lead to, as you know, there's a lot of emerging market debt. It's going to hurt emerging markets. I think the S&P 500 on average, they get about half their sales from overseas. I mean, remember a year or two ago, the market was weak because of the dollar being very strong. It was hurting their sales. So if the dollar gets, if we see it get above 110 in the next couple months, maybe it gets to 120 early next year, I think that will create lots of problems, and then that'll set up the next bull market in gold where, eventually, Mike, I think the dollar could reach a point in terms of its strength where it's negative for everyone, and the whole globe the global policymakers will get together and say, we gotta get the dollar down. We can't afford this. And last point to consider, you'll see it in the bond market and with Fed hikes, because the dollar, if it goes up too fast, that will do the job for the Fed, and the Fed will, they won't hike as fast, or the rate hikes will come off completely. So watch the dollar and watch the stock market over the next 3, 4, 5 months if you want to figure out when gold might bottom.
Yeah, well, I remember trading gold in the 2000s, and there were times when the dollar would be going up, and gold would actually go up at the same time after having declined for a long time, and those would always be great buy points. Maybe something like that can happen at some point next year.
Can you mention that again? I'm sorry. I lost you for a second.
Yeah, I remember in the 2000s when I was started trading gold, there were a couple times where gold had dips, really extended corrections or drops, whatever you want to call it, and the dollar would actually be going up, and then they would both all of a sudden go up at the same time, and that was always a good buy point for gold.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. I've mentioned this in my book, but I've looked at history, and on average, I think gold has tended to bottom like about 4 or 5 months before the dollar peaks. And who knows what it could be this time? It could be a year, it could be only 2 months, it could be 7 months. We really don't know.
Yeah.
But because usually what starts happening with those bottoms, see, when the dollar is very strong, gold gets hit, but gold then starts to perform better against all the other currencies, and then you see the gold price showing strength there, and then it starts to go up in dollar terms. But that as you mentioned, and as I just mentioned, that the two can go up together. I mean, it's happened before. I think it's going to happen again. But again, I just think the dollar strength is so critical here. I obviously want to see gold bottom as quickly as possible, and for me, I think that means we need to see the dollar continue to rise because, like I said, that's going to create lots of problems, and then create, not create, but be a catalyst for policy. For catalyst number one for the Fed not hiking as much and the Fed going softer, and number two, a catalyst for U.S. policymakers and global policymakers saying and getting together and saying, we need to get the dollar down. It's too strong. It's killing us. It's hurting everybody. I mean, at some point next year, I bet we could have Trump come out. I mean, could you imagine what would happen to gold if Trump came out and said, the dollar is too strong. We need to get the dollar down. I mean, gold would be up quite a lot, I think, after those comments.
Oh, yeah, and especially it'd be crazy, that's for sure. Well, I'll let you go, and thanks for talking with me and everyone else, and we'll do more updates next year. Have a good New Year's and Christmas.
You too, Mike. Yeah, I'd like to wish your audience a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and a great, healthy, and profitable New Year, and thanks so much for having me on, Mike.
Thank you.